And hello and welcome to this Photoshop tutorial. I'm going to show you a little bit of how Photoshop works. Hopefully this helps you guys a little bit. You can see my lovely face here in the corner. Hey everybody, it's Mr. P. Okay, so this is the basics about Photoshop. I'm going to tell you how to set up your own canvas and get things going. So the first thing you want to do is go to the top, go to File and go to New. Now I'm using a Mac, so it may be a little different than the PC, but obviously some of these things will be the same. When I go to New, there's different options. Of course, there's different templates that we can use. There's stuff for photo, and you can see here when we deal with photo, we're dealing usually with higher resolutions. Sometimes we're dealing with RGB colors. Sometimes, though, we are dealing with CMYK, and we will get into the difference of that in just a little bit. When we are printing, though, take a look. When we flip over, we're dealing with a very high resolution at 300 pixels per inch, and RGB colors still. Art and illustration. They also use RGB. Web will of course use RGB because they deal with computers, and the resolution drops to 72, and mobile is the same, and of course so does film and video. But we're going to mainly work with film and video, and that's what we're going to do with today. In HD TV, we're going to click on this one, 1080p, because that's the normal HD frame size. There is a 720p, smaller HD, not really commonly used anymore. HD 1080p is almost the standard across the board. There is also 1440 by 1080, and then of course 960 by 720, which is a very low-end HD. These three are really not used that much anymore. But if we do scroll down, there are other templates that we can look at, and there are some things that you can use. You can always play around with and mess around with. Very cool. But we're just going to go with the standard template at the top. And we can also set it up, though, for a 4K television. But in this case, we just want 1080p. We're going to hit OK, and as you can see, it pops up here in the corner. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to just start up a canvas, and we're just going to play with it a little bit. So one of the first things I like to show students is the paint bucket feature, because this gives you a background when you're dealing with any kind of art. One thing we're going to do here is we're going to look at the toolbar here on your left, and there's many tools to deal with, and we're going to get into some of them this year, not all of them. Your job is to learn more on your free time about which ones you're going to like to use and which ones will make sense. And you can see here as you hover your mouse above some of them, when you're using a Mac, it actually shows you what the tool does. But maybe not so on the PC. I don't believe it does. What we're going to look here for is the paint bucket tool. Now, the paint bucket is literally what it sounds like, a paint bucket. And as you scroll through these tools, you're going to notice there's a little downward arrow here. You can click on these. Now, I know where it is. It's under the gradient here. This is a gradient that goes from dark to white, so it's kind of transitions. When you click on this little arrow here in the bottom corner, you're going to get the option here for a paint bucket. Now what happens with the paint bucket is when I go to this white background that I have here in the layer, you can see if I click on this paint bucket, anything here in the far corner that is black will now appear on the screen. If I want to change that color, I can click on the little color chip, change it to a red, hit OK, and when I click my mouse, voila, I've got a red background. You can see the background has changed in the layers panel, and so on and so forth. Now, one interesting thing, you say, hey, but it's locked. How come you can still put it? You can still mess with a locked channel. What you can't do is delete it. As you can see here, as I'm trying, it will not delete. If I want to delete it, I have to click on the lock, removes the lock, and I could throw in the trash if there was a second layer. There always has to be one layer in Photoshop, always on the screen. Otherwise, there's no canvas, so we have to keep this layer until we build something else. Text is really easy as well. You can drop your text, put it onto the screen, type what you want. Hello, my name is Ken Platink. And you say, Mr. P, what happened to your font? And the reason why you can't see it, because it's the same red as this. So if I double click on it, you can see that there was something that was written there. Let's change it to white. And then right there, hello, my name is Ken Platink. Now I can double click on it and highlight it. You're going to make sure you're on the right layer here. And a couple things is you can make some small changes by going into fonts here in the top corner. What type of font is it? Regular, italic, bold. The font size, the sharpness of the font. You want a crisp font, smooth. Its indentation, as you can see as I'm rolling it across the screen. Its color. Do you want to curve it? You can curve your font with a bit of an arc if you like. And finally, when we click on this one here, More options in terms of spacing and how you want your font to look. Do you want it in full caps, or do you want it upper and lower small caps? So you have a bunch of options here. Of course, there's all the different spacings. You can play with that as you start to learn how to use fonts. Now, that's not the only font that you can play with. In fact, what I am going to show you here is that if you hold down this, you can do a vertical font, masking tools as well, but we'll get into that later because masking is a completely different other world. But you can also do vertical fonts. So you can type down here and say, Ken Platink. And as you can see here, I have, I'm going to move with this, sorry, wrong button. And I could type it in right there and put it in there. Pretty cool, eh? So those are a couple of things you can do. Simple paint bucket, simple that. Now, one other thing I'm going to show you in this quick tutorial is how do you make a gradient background, and that's really, really cool. What a gradient background is a background that changes from one color to another, and it's your option on how you want to make it look. So the easiest way to do this is create a new layer, and you can do that if you go down to the bottom corner underneath your layers right here. If you look here, there is an option to make a new layer, and when I click on it, it puts it right above the red layer because that's where I was selected on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over to the paint bucket. I'm going to click on it and switch back to gradient, and when I switch to gradient now, I get an option of making a gradient change. Now right now my gradient colors will be red and white because those are the two color chips I selected, but I really want to use black. I like red and black. It looks really good together. And all I have to do is, now that I'm selected on this layer, is I have to draw a line, and that line will determine the length and the color of the gradient in terms of as it's transitioning. So if I go like this and I click with my mouse and I pull and I let go, the gradient is going to move from the top left of the screen to the bottom right of the screen. Watch. Or it won't. I know why. There. I had something selected. I didn't quite see it here underneath my picture. That's how you do it. So what you're going to do is grab your mouse, you pull. Now, if you take a look at my screen right now, you can see the top corner here is going to show red. And if you look at the color chip, the first color chip is red. And as it pulls down towards the bottom corner, which is going to be black. And as I let go, you can see it changed a little bit. In fact, the shorter I make it, the harder the change is going to be. Watch this. Very hard line that comes up. If I want to make it very subtle, I can go like this. I'm just going to put my mouse, my face over here for a second. And I'm going to go from one corner to the next. And it's going to be a much more softer gradient. As you can see, it's very red here and goes to a very soft black. It's however you choose to make a gradient. In fact, you can go whatever angle you want. And there's other options with gradients that you can play with. Up here is the gradient tools. Lots of stuff you can do. The opacity of the gradient you can work with. Different styles. There is radial gradients. As you can see, it makes a circle with a red background. The smaller the line, the smaller the circle. The larger the line, the larger the circle is going to be. Right? So you can do kind of cool effects as you play with this. There's a ton here to deal with, and of course you can click on these buttons here and kind of play around with it. The only way you're going to learn is by messing with it, and I really think that's a great idea to get learning with this software. So play around with it, see what you can learn, and in the next tutorial we're going to show you how to do layer styles and how to make some adjustments to your fonts and any of your documents. Okay.